Hello and welcome to Digital Photo Mentor live stream weekly here on YouTube. I'm wearing my Skylum ribbon today. I received a lovely package in the mail from Skylum this week, including a new hat, which you can see is covered in cat hair already. So it's Luminar Neo. So for Holly's benefit, yes, it does say that on the back. If you are new to this channel or to this live stream, what I'm going to do today is to edit some subscriber submitted images. We've got a lot of people going through our Luminar Neo course right now, and some of them actually submitted some images that are really interesting to work on. So I've got those for today. And I'd love to hear where you are all from. I'm seeing some new faces here in the chat. Ken, I got your bracketed images. Very smart. Sending a zip file. Yes. Marguerite, Wintry, Sault Ste. Marie. We went through that last week here, Marguerite. We're recovered now. Let's see where else. Marty, Deb from Alaska. Ken and Robert talking cigars. Brandon, I've got your images as well. So lots of Neo students here. Nice to see you all. Holly wants a hat without the cat hair. Oh, come on. I've got it all over my shirt too. If you see my shirt, so this is the shirt they sent me, Photo Combat, and I'm also covered in cat hair. Just comes with the territory. Let's see. Jan is in UK, and Sheila's down east in Canada. Trish in New Zealand. AJ's got snow in Chicago. Al, San Francisco is nice. Awesome. All right. Well, welcome everybody. If you're here for the first time, please give us a thumbs up on this video. It really helps us to make strides in YouTube, increase our channel, and find more viewers that I can help with their photo editing. So please give this video a thumbs up. And if you haven't already done so, subscribe to the channel. So I am going to hop over into my editing and we'll get started. So I'll be right back. Okay, I think I'm going to go this way. Oops. Sorry, meant to put that. Okay, so here we go. So just for the purposes of how I work the lives, if you're new, I use a combination of Lightroom, Photoshop, Luminar, Topaz, whatever I feel is necessary on the image. And if I know that the person that sent it is using a particular software or wants it demonstrated using a particular software, then I will do that. So I've got a few different images from some of our Neo students, and I brought all of these up here. AJ is a regular here on the live, and he sent this one. And was this the one you were talking about sharpening? Because you asked me about the details panel and sharpening. This one looks fairly sharp, AJ, because you had asked about using the details panel. And this is what he did for his edit, which I actually really quite like. So I think this one, it makes a really nice black and white conversion, gives sort of that old world feel. And you said if it needs it for sharpening. Awesome. I don't think it does, AJ. I think that it was sharp. Like when I looked at it, the balls look sharp, but you wanted me to go through the details panel in Luminar, so I can do that. We also have this image from Brandon, and he wanted to know how to tone down the leaves and bring out the bird more, so we can do that as well. And then a couple of other fun images from Al and from Ken. So I'm going to start with AJ's. Okay. Now, what are you using predominantly as your main editor, AJ? I think we've discussed this in the past. I'm just looking up your software are you using? I don't have it in this current one, but what are you normally using? Aurora, Topaz. What else are you using? Lightroom. Okay, perfect. So I'll start here in Lightroom. Right. So the first thing that I generally do in Lightroom is to choose a new camera profile. Let me just make these thumbnails a little smaller. So in Lightroom, turn on my little green glowing cursor. You click on these little squares over here next to where it says profile. Okay. So if you pull down the list, you only get the Adobe ones. But if you go over here, right, now you get camera ones. Okay. So camera matching. Let me close this. You get camera matching. See that? And also it comes with some artistic and creative ones. Okay. So if we wanted black and white, you could literally just go with one of the black and white ones. But I'm going to go a different way with yours. I'm going to keep the color, but I'm going to go a little bit more antique with it. So I'm going to try portrait. And then I want to see what these other vintage ones. So these are all profiles that come with Lightroom. And as I move my mouse over them, you could see a little preview. And that looks kind of cool. It's giving them a yellow feel. So it's like they're aged. That one's not bad, a little blue. And I'm just picking one that kind of catches my eye. I think I like that one. I tend to like things that look like a faded sepia tone look. So that's what I'm going to go for in this image. Right. The next thing I do is to set the black and the white points. Right. If you are using Lightroom, you just hold the shift key down, double click on the word whites, double click on the word blacks. And what that does is it pops the graph over to the edges. Okay. So it means that I'm not getting any clipping. Looks like it's clipped. Ah, you're using because of the profile I've chosen. Do you see what's happening here? Because of the profile I've chosen, it is actually not allowing me to go to the edges of the graph. You see that? So it's punching it as far up as possible, trying to make white. But because I've used a camera profile that is actually not fully using the whole histogram, it's being tricked. So I'm just going to scale that back on both ends. Let's try something like that. Okay, because I'm overriding, or I'm trying to override this vintage look. And what it's done is it's made a muted white and a muted black. Right? I am going to warm it up a little bit more. And then I want to go to work on this white sheet, which is really bright. Right? I could take the highlights down, which definitely helps. You see that? Like so. And then maybe bring that up a little bit more. And then I want to bring this background color darker. It looks like some sand or something that the bucket is sitting in. So I'm going to go down into the HSL panel, which stands for hue, which is the tint, saturation or intensity of the color, and luminance, which is the brightness. And in Lightroom, you have a targeted adjustment tool. So you just click on it and then hover over the color that you want to affect and click and drag. So now I'm darkening just this color. And can you see that? I might go down here because I'm missing sort of the lighter tones. So see how well that's working? So there's obviously yellow and orange in there. And I want to bring the saturation down as well. Right? So I could do the sliders, but the targeted tool works really well to make sure that I get everything. Okay? Because when you have, and the reason I'm doing this, I want to talk about why I'm doing this. Warm colors stand out more than cool colors. So warm colors like orange, yellow, red stand out and project in your image. Okay, so what that means is that as the background, it's going to catch more attention or gather more attention than the bucket of balls. Okay. Okay, which question again? The mount slider above this panel movable. Okay, I see questions. Okay, so I don't have Lightroom. Our profile's a bit like LUTs. Yes, they are actually, Janet. So in Lightroom, that's kind of how you would apply them. So yes, very similar. So if you're using Luminar Neo, but you can apply profiles in Neo as well. I'll show that on when we get to Brandon's image, okay? Okay, which part did you want me to explain again, AJ? How the profile changed the histogram. Okay, so how the profile changed the histogram, what it's done is it's made the tones of the image. So normally black is 000 in terms of no density on red, green, and blue, and pure white is 256 of each, meaning it's red, green, blue equal. So what it's done is it's actually shifted. Let me show you on the curve. Okay. Oops, wrong one. Let me show you on the curve. So what it's done effectively is this. Okay. So it's made it so that, see how it's squished in the histogram as I do that? See that? It's literally changing where the white point is. So instead of pure white, now it's like light gray, okay? And instead of pure black, the endpoint is now dark gray. So that's what the preset or the profile has done, okay? See that? So I'm replicating the same thing over here in the histogram or in the curves tool. And I noticed that on the one that you did, there was a bit of a matte effect as well. Okay, so you've kind of got the same effect here. So maybe you didn't even know you were doing it, but definitely you've got the same. Oops, that's not what I want to do. Definitely you've got something similar, because you see that your histogram isn't touching the edge here either. So you've just done it on the black end, and this profile did it on both ends. Does that make sense? Okay, so where was I? If that doesn't answer that question, let me know. Okay, so the reason that I toned down the orange in the background is because the warm colors of the background grab too much attention, and I want to focus on these balls in the bucket. Okay, so now that I've got that, I'm going to add a slight edge vignette, just using one of my presets. You can share that in the group, a link to our presets if people want to check those out. And all that does is just determines the sliders in the effects panel. Okay, so presets in Lightroom don't overwrite other things, except depending on what I've set the preset as. Okay, so in vignettes, they only affect these sliders. Right. If you're using Luminar Neo, unfortunately, you can't just do a preset for one tool. Okay, so I've got the vignette on there. Now I want to darken this white paper and bring the balls out. So I'm going to start with a mask, and I'm going to select subject and see what it comes up with. Okay, so perfect. So Lightroom chose the bucket as the subject, which is exactly what I want. So I'm going to increase the exposure. I'm also going to bring up the whites. So when I increase the exposure, it's bringing up the midtones of the image, but I want to make sure that I have nice highlights on the balls as well. Okay, so I'm actually going to do all three. I'm going to decrease the shadows or blacks, increase the exposure. Look at the reflection on the inside of the bucket coming out. Isn't that cool? And I'm also going to add some, went too far here, texture. Let's see what happens if we go really high. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so we can see the balls better. Okay, so texture is bringing out that dirt. See that on the balls? So kind of looking like ancient. Bringing up the clarity, which increases the edge contrast. Okay, so if I turn this mask off, so see what that's doing on the balls. That's great. Now, the other thing I could do is darken everything else. So if I create a new mask, again, it did such a great job of selecting the subject that I can just do the same thing again and then invert it. So now it's affecting everything but the subject. Now I can darken. Now I can bring the highlights way down on that paper without affecting the highlights on the balls. Okay, because that was my concern. When you do what's called a global edit, it applies to the entire image. So I wanted to bring the whites down, but only on the paper. Okay, so this is a great way to do it. I'm also going to bring the contrast down, texture down, clarity down, maybe even sharpness. Okay, so I'm sort of blurring. See how that's blurring that paper out a little bit? And I might go even farther on the darkness, like so. Okay, so now you can see, I'm just going to move this over. So you can see what it's doing. So if I turn the masks off, that was before masking and after. So see what the idea is to bring the attention and the focus onto the balls. So now we're getting there. So that's before, after. Okay, so we're getting there. And I might go in and darken the vignette even a little bit more now that I've done some work on the background. And the thing with the vignette in Lightroom is that you can't position it. Okay, so if I wanted to position the vignette off center, I'd have to use another mask and use a radial mask. But if I put it here and blur it, that's actually not too bad. I just want some more edge darkening. You see what that's doing? So everything I'm doing, excuse me, is to bring the focus into those balls, okay? Now I'm going to add, now I'm going to add some color grading, right? If you are using Luminar, that is the toning tool. And in Lightroom, there's 3 options. You could do highlights, shadows, or midtones. I usually like to do shadows only, and I like to add sort of a yellow orange. Adobe's telling me I have to update my apps. Okay, so I'm just going to add a little bit of yellow. Thanks, Adobe. Right, and see what this is doing. See, it's giving that sort of yellow overall tone. And after doing that, I'm going to go back to the basic panel and bring the overall saturation of the image down. So I'm creating that sort of faded out sepia look. Okay, so by adding the toning or color grading in the shadows only, I get this sort of really antique look. If I want to bring out the reds a little bit more, okay, I could go back to HSL and saturate the reds. So let's see what's happening there. So see how it's affecting those laces on the balls. Okay, like so. Okay. I'm fairly happy with that. So without going over to Luminar, which I might do, I would possibly add a texture overlay on this one around the outside and leave the balls how they are. I don't even mind the central composition on this one, AJ. Yeah, I like the photo as well. I think it really is cool. Where did I select the camera profiles? Is that a different area to lens corrections? Ed said, let me put that question up on the screen. Yes, if you're using Lightroom, are you using Lightroom as well as Neo, Ed? If you're using Lightroom, it's up here in the basic panel. So right at the top here where it says profile. But if you pull down the list, you only get the Adobe ones. If you click on the little 4 squares, it's like little thumbnails. You get a bunch more, and I went into the vintage ones. Okay. Let's see if I go back to choosing portrait, which is slightly different. So if I go back to portrait, now I get a full histogram. Okay, so it's not squishing it anymore. I actually kind of like that look better. So now I'm going to go back and change it to that because I really wanted the red laces to show up, and they're doing a really nice job there. Okay, so just to review, right? I darkened outside the bucket, lightened inside. I lowered the saturation and contrast and sharpness outside and increased inside. So this one was actually a really good example because it's a really cut and dried subject, which is a circle, right? So it was easy to do. Yeah, fun image, AJ. That would make a cool poster, actually. You have a sip of my coffee here. You took 1,000 pictures this week. I'm a wizard. Oh, cool. I like to be wizards. You're using Lightroom and Neo. Okay. So, yes. So, if I was going to take this one to Neo, I'm not going to on this one because I've got a couple others that I want to do in Neo. The only thing I would probably do is add texture actually around the outside. Give it more of that. Let's see. New YouTube banner. Thanks, Vicky. I like his original edit as well, right? So it's not, about which one is better. Let's look at them both on the screen. Right? See how his is sort of that faded out look, right? So neither, to me, I like them both, right? And when you submit that one, AJ, I actually thought, geez, what am I going to do to this? Because it looks pretty good, right? So I try to approach it from a different perspective. The only thing that I might say you could do is bring the highlights up on the balls inside the bucket a little bit more, and darken the paper, right? So the difference between your image and my image is that the balls stand out a bit more. I find it funny that I'm saying balls so many times. All right, let's move on to the next one. Let's see. Okay. Kenneth is here, and he sent me 5 bracketed images of this one. And you are here, right, Ken? The challenge with doing HDR is that you want to do HDR in the right moments, right? So I actually wrote an article on this that I want you to check out, Ken. If you can find when to do HDR article, please, Rob, that would be great. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through these, and I put your exposures in order from light to dark on purpose, because I noticed that's not the order they were shot in. When you are doing HDR, okay, so what camera did you use here? Let me just check this out. Panasonic. Okay. So when you're doing HDR, if you're doing bracketing with the auto exposure bracketing settings, most cameras will allow you to change it, because some will do they'll do the correct exposure first and then over under. And for me, I want to see them when I'm looking at them. I want to see them like this. Okay. And I'll show you why. So when you're bracketing, what you want to do is you want to make sure that you capture all the detail in the shadows in your brightest image. Okay. So if we're looking at your brightest image, actually, I'm going to go to the middle one. Right. When you look at this middle image, oh, have you edited this one? What I'm looking at is the histogram. Okay. So I actually wouldn't have bracketed this scene at all, because there's full detail on both ends. And if I turn on the clipping warnings, only the very top of the sun is clipping. Right. So I actually would have just edited this single image. Right. To give you a comparison, I had some HDR images ready to show you. For example, this is the one that I gave you guys in the course, right? So if you're doing the Neo course, I gave you these to practice with. So try these, and you see the difference here, Ken? So what I'm doing is 2 things. I'm bracketing 2 stops apart. I noticed yours were 1 stop apart, which in that case is okay because you've got clear sky, so it's a good idea. But you want to go a little farther if you have a high contrast scene. Okay, so in this one, okay, so let me go back one. Okay, so this was my brightest image. So when you're looking at your brightest image, you want to make sure that you are not clipping anything in the shadows. Okay, so there's lots of detail here in this wood stove. So 2 seconds was my brightest exposure, right? Then I went to a half a second. So that's 2 stops, not 1 stop, right? Then I went another 2 stops, another 2 stops, and another 2 stops. Okay, so I went until this shadow or this highlight area now has no clippings. Okay, I don't know why it's not giving me clippings. Oh, here we go. Okay, so now the shadows are clipping, but there's nothing clipping in the highlights. Okay, and you can actually see stuff out the windows. So this is the ultimate contrasty scene. Okay, so you can see that my brighter images all have clipping in the windows, but now the brightest one, okay, that I used in the set doesn't clip the shadows. So that's what I'm looking for. No clipping in the shadows on the brightest, no clipping in the highlights on the darkest, right? And then when I pull them together, let me see, did I do an edit on this one? Okay, so here's one example of the finished edit that I did. Okay, so you can see the big difference, right? From there, this is one that I did from a single image, and you see there's no detail in the windows. Okay, that's the big difference. So when to bracket is key. If I go back to the beach images here, where are we? I just got slightly lost. Okay, so if we go back to the beach images, I'm actually just going to work on this middle one. Okay, so when you look at the histogram, there's nothing clipping here. So other than the sun, so you really don't need to bracket. Okay. All right, so what I'm going to do with this one, same thing. I'm going to change the profile. And often on these ones, I find that like a scenery or a landscape one might do better. Okay, so the scenery gives a little bit more contrast. So let's try that profile. And then I'm going to straighten it because it's a little bit crooked. So there's a couple of ways you can straighten it. I'm going to use auto in the crop tool and see if that does anything. So it did a little bit. Okay, I'm going to try another method. I'm going to use the ruler inside the crop tool, place it right on the horizon on this edge, and then I'm going to drag it all the way over here because what I'm doing is trying to match it up with the horizon. And the longer you can make your line, the more accurate it will be. See, that did a better job because I think Lightroom was trying to correct it based on the pier, not on the horizon. Okay. Now I'm going to actually crop this little bit of dirt out on the bottom and a whole bunch of sky. Okay, and maybe even a little off this side because for me, this is your picture right here. Right, so you've got sort of your 1/3 sky, 2/3 water and pier, and your sun is now sort of in that 1/3 or the third corner and cross point. Okay. All right, so now I'm going to do the trick with the double click on the whites and the blacks. Okay, and you see what that did when I darkened the picture. Right, remember we talked about this in the Neo course. Whenever you add blacks to your image, you're going to get more color, more intense color. Okay, so in a situation like this, another reason why I wouldn't do HDR is I actually prefer the silhouette and leaving it dark. Okay? Let's just give it a little more contrast. Okay, now we can try the white balance. Let's just try cloudy or shade, because if you go to cloudy or shade, it's going to add more yellow. Okay, so the way that the white balances work in your camera is if you choose cloudy, it's going to add yellow to try and compensate for the blue that's in the scene. Okay? That's a little bit too yellow. Let's try daylight. Okay, that's not bad. I think I'm just going to give it a little, I want the water to be blue. So I think what we're going to have to do is edit the water and the sky separately. Okay, so I'm going to do select sky in this one. We'll see. Okay, so it did a good job. So it's selected the sky. I'm going to change the overlay color to green because it's hard to see the red when the sky is red. Okay, so this just helps me see it a little better. Now I'm going to bring the exposure down, and here is where I can give it more yellow. Okay, so I can intensify the yellow and the red here without shifting the blue. Okay, so just like that. Then I'm going to do another one of select sky because it did a good job, and then invert. Okay, so that's everything else. Okay, and now I'm going to go more blue. Oh, lovely. My Photoshop doesn't work. Okay. See how I'm getting more blue in the water now? Okay. And then just close that. So the thing with blue and orange is that they are opposite colors on the color wheel. So they're what's called complementary colors. I'm just going to find a color wheel for you. Show you. Okay, so who knows something about color wheel? Okay, if you are a painter, okay, you know about the color wheel. All right, let me just find a good one. Okay, this one is not bad. So let's look at this color wheel here. So blue and yellow or orange are opposite. Okay, so that means they're called complementary colors. And when you have those type of colors in an image, it's actually really pleasing, okay? Because the orange will project. Remember, we talked about warm colors projecting, cool colors receding, okay? So look at the colors we have here, right? Opposite, okay? And I think I'm going to just add another slight vignette here on the bottom. Okay, again, oops, that's not what I wanted to do. Just undo that. I want a linear gradient. So I'm just going to drag up from the bottom to add a linear gradient. And if you hold the shift key, it keeps everything straight. Like I can't tilt it. Okay, so it just keeps everything straight with the bottom line. And all I'm going to do is just lower the exposure a little bit. So again, the eye is coming in to the middle of the picture. Okay, I could do the same thing if I want to add a darkening on the top. I could actually add a second one, darkening the top of the sky. See that? So now my mask is on the top and the bottom. That's actually one of the really cool things about the new masks in Lightroom since they updated it, is you can combine them. So previously you had to do one and then copy it and do the same settings. Right? Now you've got the same settings in two places. Okay. So see what that's doing? It's just darkening those edges. So that's what I would do with this image. How's our questions? So because the orange and blue are opposite, would the color harmony be a good choice to go to a Neo? Yes. In fact, let's try that. All right, so let's take this one to Neo. I love that you guys are getting this stuff, right? When you come up with questions like that, or the other day when you were talking about a reflection and the balloon image that I was doing because I missed the reflection. I love it that you guys are getting this stuff. It makes me so happy. Okay, so let's go to color harmony at Vicky's suggestion, color contrast. So drag it up. So now we're on the orange, which means it's going to increase the contrast and brightness of orange. But let's see what happens if we go blue. That's kind of cool, actually. And then let's just dial it back. And of course, remember, we can mask it off the top of the image. Look what that's doing to the water. That's kind of cool, actually. So I'm just going to focus on the water. And we're picking up more orange in there. See that? It's really intensifying the water. Let's try a split color as well. Okay, so the cool colors we can make cooler. And the warm colors we can make warmer. Yeah, I like what it's doing to the water, but it's making the orange a little bit too intense. So I'm just going to do a really quick, large brush to mask off the sky so I don't get so much orange. That's better. So that's doing a really cool thing to the water. Look at that. Great idea. Great idea. Let's go to super contrast too. Okay, so that's another one where we can affect the contrast of these midtones, which again could be the water. Okay, so look at, I'm bringing up the highlight just on the water. Once again, I will be so happy when they come up with the copy. Oh, see, I painted instead of erasing. Copy mask. I will be so happy. Just need to invert that. So I painted on the sky by accident, and I just have to invert it so that the mask is on the water, okay? Or the effect. So see, super contrast is doing a nice job there as well. Okay, so this is what we brought from Lightroom. Looks pretty good to me. And now we've spunked up the water a lot, okay? You could even try a LUT, because there are quite a few LUTs, especially those new ones that came out, right? I gave, there's a free contact sheet that you can get that I did for the Land of Freedom lots. These are the ones that came out by Skylum. If you could share a link to where they can get this, Rob, or the video that I did on this on YouTube. So the folks at Skylum came up with these Land of Freedom lots with the colors of Ukrainian cities. Right. So if I take a look at these, I can see if there's one. Ooh, this last one here. I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce these names. Okay, but you can see there's lots of blue in the highlights. So let's try that one. So I just have to go and find it. And I think I put them in here. There's my lots. I have lots of them, Land of Freedom. And that's why I made the contact sheet, because you can't really preview them. Ooh, look at that. Look at that. I might take it off the sky again. So why I keep masking the sky is you don't want to go really over the top with your oranges and yellows, because they'll start to look sort of fake. Right? I want to keep that less sort of garish. But that does a nice job. Look at it. Look at that. Okay, so now that I've got the water masked, I can actually just try different ones in the collection. Let's see which other one might work. Let's try Kharkiv. Again, I'm not going to attempt to pronounce these things. So look at that. So because they were designed with the colors of the Ukrainian flag, they're adding blue to the shadows and orange to the highlights, which was exactly what we wanted, right? So there's our Lightroom edit. Let's go back to Lightroom and then we can compare the two, right? All right, AJ, what do you think? Or Ken, what do you think of this? Thanks, Vicky. I'm such a great teacher. I don't even want to read this. I'm going to be embarrassed. But thank you so much, Vicky. Let me go back over to Lightroom here. The last 3 minutes of this edit was amazing. You're welcome, Brendan. And wait till you get to the one that I just did for lesson 23. I did the pocket watch in the images that you guys have for the course, and I think you're going to be really impressed. Ken, what's in the 1.0.4 Neo release? Actually, they fixed the issue with working with Photoshop as a smart object. That was the main thing. And other than that, mostly bug fixes. So definitely go ahead and do the upgrade to 1.0.4, especially if you're using it with Photoshop, because now it works. So when we talked about that in a previous lesson, and I've actually updated that lesson as well. Okay? I think it was lesson 18. Thanks, Al. All right. So let's see the comparison now. I'm just going to make a virtual copy of this one and reset the edits here. Okay, so we've got the original version, or the original as shot. Okay, so left is original as shot. This was the middle bracketed image. Okay, this is what we came out of from up within Lightroom, which looks pretty good, right? And then now this is what we've got after Neo and intensifying the water and the blue. Okay? It's little things that, what I want you to consider is there's going too far, which is taking your sliders and everything to the extremes. And then there's not going far enough, right? So sometimes if you've looked at an image for a while, what I recommend is leave it, come back the next day and look at it with fresh eyes, okay? Because you might go, oh, I missed that, or, oh, I went too far, okay? So come back and look at it the next day, and do that with a lot of your lesson, a lot of your images, especially as you're learning, right? So would we all agree that that's the best one, right? So Lightroom still looks drab now, doesn't it? Look at that. The orange on the water comes out. Print it, Ken, hang it. All right. Now, let's see. We've got one of Brandon's. I've got two of Brandon's. So let's do the Magpie first. And we've got good exposure, nice and sharp, and a Sony camera. Okay. So when I go in here to look at, actually, I'm going to do this one in Neo because I know that Brandon is using Neo. So I'm going to actually take the raw file over. So if you want to go from Lightroom to Neo with the raw file, you have to choose export and then open source file. Okay. And you'll see the difference. When it opens up in Neo, we'll still have, or we should have, fingers crossed, the develop raw tool. Yes. Okay. So see that? So if I had opened it as a copy, it wouldn't show me develop raw. I will answer that when we come back to Lightroom, Ed. Okay, so let's do this one here. So the same thing applies when we are working in Neo. So your camera profiles are up here, and you see that Neo recognized all of the Sony camera profiles. Okay, so no, there isn't a preview, but I can just click on each of them to see what it does. So I'm looking for one that minimizes the tree. That looks better. Okay, that's obviously black and white. And I'm just trying to see which one. Okay, that's a lot of contrast. Which one is going to give me the best or easiest starting point? Okay. Ooh, that one looks good. Okay, so I think I'm going to go with this one. Okay, because we had, so that's ST. Well, that's pretty similar. What was the other one that I said was good? They're all fairly similar in this regard here. That's not bad. Okay, so we're going to start with VV, which I'm guessing is vivid of some kind. Okay, so that's your profile at the very top, right? If you don't see these things, use the triangles to open. Right now, because I'm using a Mac, I have the ability to see the histogram, and I know that this is coming for Windows, and that's something that they've talked about, adding a histogram where you can do view histogram. I don't think they've added it yet. No, so it's coming. All right, it's coming. Yeah, still no histogram. So I'm using mine here for the purposes of looking at what's clipping. Okay, so I want to bring the highlights down a little bit, and I want to affect the tree, right? So what things can I do in here that's going to affect the tree and not the bird? So I want to make the tree darker. Okay. Brandon says, you don't have any cast Sony profiles in a Neo. Have you done the update yet, Brandon? Because I know that they added a bunch of camera profiles in the recent update, but you can see that I opened your file and they are there. Okay. So let me know if you've done the update yet, because that might solve that problem. Okay. So what tool am I going to use? Okay. I'm going to go down to color and the HSL panel, luminance for brightness, and I'm going to work on darkening the tree. So I know that the tree is probably got a lot of green and some yellow. So see how the tree's got a lot of yellow? So I'm going to darken that, darken the green, and then I might take them down in saturation as well. Okay, so I'm just trying to minimize the tree a little bit. I could actually darken the blues to make the sky darker. See how that's affecting the sky? You've updated. Okay, well, I'm not sure what's happening there, Brandon. Maybe send Skylum and support an email, a ticket, because they should show up there for you. Make sure you're importing your original raw files, because it obviously it opened for me. I can try opening this file directly in Luminar as well. So let's see what happens after I do this one and see if it works for me. Are you on Mac or Windows, Brandon? Okay, so now let's see what this is doing. Okay, so see how that's darkening the tree? That looks good. Now I want to bring the bird out. Okay, so we need to brighten the bird. So I'm going to go in to Enhance. So I know Enhance does great things about bringing out detail, right? Look what's happening. You want to be, okay, this is what I want to do on purpose, okay? So you want to be aware of doing things like this. This is what's called over editing. So you've got a fringe around the trees. You've got oversaturated sky. This is oversaturated. And when you zoom in, okay, you can see some weird artifacts and the sky is super grainy. Okay, so when you see stuff like this, that is a clue. It's like flashing at you that you've gone too far. Okay, so that's taking the sky too far. But in this case, and I'm also seeing that there's a blob thing there. So it looks like you've got some, that's actually usually water on your lens, Brandon. So check your lens on this one to see if you've got some water spots, right? Because that doesn't look like a dust spot, that's a water spot. So I want to only put this on the bird because it's increasing saturation and contrast everywhere. And I just want it to work on the bird. Okay, so I'm going to lower the softness of the brush a little bit because I want to get it just on him. Okay, so I want to paint so that he comes out more. See how that's brightening up his feathers? Okay. Another thing I know that I'm going to do is I'm going to take the structure a little bit to the negative side because these trees are really super contrasty and have a lot of texture. Okay, I talk about this a lot is that the things that draw your eye are sharpness, bright color, contrast, and brightness. So in this image, you're going to be drawn by the sky, the sharpness of the trees, the contrast of the bird, and the bright color of the sky. Okay, so you're all over the place, and we want to really bring attention to the bird, right? We might even want to crop this image as well. So I'm going to see what happens if I do. So see, structure negative is starting to blur the trees a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to take it to extreme and then just mask out the bird. Okay, now in this case, I'm doing the opposite because I don't want him blurred in any way. Then to just sort of blend it a little bit, see how I got a bigger brush, a softer brush? I'm just going to go all around him at 50%. So when you see the mask, it's not a hard line. It fades into him. Okay, so that's why I've used that bigger brush around him. Okay, so let's see what that's doing. Okay, that helps. Let's try a crop. Okay. Keyboard shortcut for, oh, my keyboard shortcut doesn't work in here. That's interesting. Let's see what Luminar thinks is a good crop. So when you press the button, it's going to give you a suggestion. Okay, so I would tend to agree with that, but I might even take it farther. Okay. Let's see what happens if we crop the sky out completely. And I'm actually going to flip this image. Now we got to recrop. Ideally, what I'm looking for, Brennan, is I would like to have more space in front of him, right? So when he's facing a direction, right, he's facing that way, I want more space in front of him, but there isn't any. So it's kind of, you're struggling a little bit, or I'm struggling a little bit to make a composition because he feels like he's leaving the frame, right? And the reason that I cropped it so he's facing this way instead of this way is that when you look at images, right, we read from left to right. So it's looking like he's looking forward. Right? I could try that again, and let's see what happens if I flip it back the other way. Let's see the difference here. See how he feels like he's looking backwards now, right? Now I want to lower the contrast. So there's all kinds of things like we can do here to lower the attention on the tree. Okay, contrast is another one. So I'm going to do a little bit of smart contrast, bring the highlights down, and then bring the overall exposure down. Right? Notice that I'm looking at everything in conjunction with him, but I'm going to lower. I'm going to mask him, right? I've got too much color in the sky. See that? So I'm lowering the saturation. So once again, see, that's too blue. You want to watch for those things. So then I'm just going to mask it by erasing from him. See that? And then a bigger brush. And I'm just going to make a circle around him so that he sort of grabs the attention in this area. Okay. Let's see how we're doing. Okay. Before, after. So the whole idea is everything I'm doing is to bring attention into him, right? Of course, we can do a vignette to further darken the edges. Make it smaller because I've cropped a whole bunch. See how I wasn't seeing the vignette there? It's only over here. That's because I cropped most of the image out, so I need to make it smaller. And then pick my subject. Oops. I find that choose subject really handy. Okay, so that's about what I would do here. And then I might go and do some details on him. Aha, so who had asked about the details panel? That was AJ, right? You asked about details. Okay, so here we are in details. So let me go over here and focus on the bird, okay? So I'm going to bring the medium details. If you're not sure what these are doing, slide them all the way up. Okay, so medium details is sort of really nice overall. It picks up the branches. When you do small details, it goes to minute things. So details of feather, it also will intensify grain if you have any grain or noise, right? And also sharpens things that look unsharp. Okay, so look at his beak, right? He just looks ever so slightly out of focus. He's pretty sharp though. But the small detail slider, normally you want to keep it low unless you have a focus issue. So I'm going to bring these up. Okay. Sharpening, I usually kind of go, again, minimal, because if you go too far, right, I'll show you what over sharpened looks like. Okay, this is over sharpened. Let me zoom in even farther. So over sharpened, now we see all the noise and not just details, but it's literally sharpening the grain of the noise of the image. Okay, so that's too much sharpening. And you want to keep the mask slider higher as well. So masking, what it does is it, as you increase the masking slider, it will take it off. Actually, let's see that in action. It will remove it from areas that are smoother. So it should remove it from his tummy here, or his belly. So at masking 0, it's applying to the whole image. As I increase it, we should start to see it remove that effect from any smooth areas like his feathers there. You see that? Okay, so the masking slider here is really important. I still think that has to come down. Okay, so we've definitely gone too far with all of these. Let's look at before and after. This is a really subtle one, right? And I'm just going to paint it in to the bird himself here, into his face and his beak. And I want to get some on his feathers over here and his wings. Okay, so notice I'm doing this one more zoomed in to 100% so I can really see where it's going. Okay. Remember, your eye goes to areas of sharpness, contrast. Now he's light, his face is dark, right? So your eye's not going to go to him. So let's see, we're sharpening him up. Okay. We can also do another develop and increase the exposure and increase the shadows. And again, I'm just going to zoom in. So I'm going to paint it into the bird, but only his face this time. So use the develop tool as your dodge and burn tool. Okay. So I'm just going to paint this effect in here so it gets a little more detail. See what that's doing? Just kind of picking up his face. Okay. Now I overbrushed into this area on the tree here. So if I look at where my mask is, this is where I turn the softness down. So now I have a hard edge brush, okay, because I want to get close to him. So my brush is where the white lines are, not the green one. Okay, that's just my cursor marker. So now I'm erasing from there so that I don't get the tree any brighter. Okay. So before and after. I'm still not crazy about that blue. I would probably tone it down a little bit more as well. Okay. So why does this not take me back to Lightroom? That's interesting. Haha. There's no save. Well, that's interesting. I think I found a bug, you guys. There's no update or send back to. There's no way to send it back. Maybe if I get out of here. Interesting. Well, I think we found a bug here. Because I have no way of sending it back to Lightroom. I'm going to leave this one on the screen here because I'm going to have to send this to them. So when you find these kind of things, definitely let them know about it. Okay. I'm going to see if I can edit. I can't copy that. Nothing. Yeah. Definitely. Interesting. All right. Well, we've got a tricky one here. So let's compare this one to the Lightroom version. Okay. So that was the original. Okay. Let me see if I can put these side by side somehow. I can't resize it now. There we go. All right, so see the difference? So Lightroom. Can't make it any smaller versus what I did in Luminar. Oh, I could do the same thing in Lightroom as well with a lot of the tonality and the masking. I just did it in Luminar because I know that's what Brandon is using. Okay. Yeah, it won't let me save it all, Marty. Like there's no save, there's no update, nothing. Yeah, I went Lightroom update, open in Neo as source files, but I've done that before, Rob, and it did work. So you had the same thing happen. Yeah, there's no export, there's no nothing, Janet. Like if I look at Neo here, right, there's no button up here. There's no buttons for anything. Because normally it would say apply, which would then take you back to Lightroom, right? All I have, the option is quitting. So I'm not sure what happens, right? So if I close it, I don't know what happens. Oh, that's interesting. It said adding one photo to Lightroom. Let's see if it came in here. I don't see it. Let me go to the folder that it's in. Is it there? No. So it said that it was adding an image, but I don't see it here. So yeah, bizarre. Well, we've definitely found something weird there. Does that helpful, Brandon, in terms of how my workflow went there? Yeah, unfortunately, I couldn't export it. All right. Yeah, it's possible that that bug just came in, and they may not have a report of it yet. So I'll make a little report for them. All right, let's take a look at this one, which is Al's image. And can I show your after image, Al? I'm going to find it. You shared this in our Facebook group. Let me know if you're okay with me sharing that. So he shared it in our Facebook group for the Luminar Neo course students. And I was quite impressed with what he had done, actually. So I'd love to be able to show your after image. And you've done a couple of versions because you did a color and a black white one. So I'm just looking for it in the group here, but if you're okay with that, I'm going to share it. Here we go. You're okay with that? Okay, cool. So here's our group. So this group is just for students in the class. So if you're not a member of this group, you do have to be in the course to join this group. But this was the original image that Al posted. And that's what he came up with. So you wanted to see what I would do, and then you did a black and white version. So I'm curious to see what I'm going to do with this one. All right, so let's, instead of doing the over to Neo as a raw file, because that one didn't work, I'm going to start in Luminar. I'm going to start in Lightroom and do some basic edits. And let's see. Okay, so it's got standard. Okay, that one gives me more contrast. I don't mind what it's doing to the statue on the vivid, but I'm going to do that with some tools anyway. So I think I'm going to stick with what's there. And let's check the histogram. So I'm holding down the Alt Option key and clicking highlights. Okay, so I can bring those highlights in the sky down. So see what that did. And I want to make sure that I have black. So this is the same as doing the shift double click. I want to make sure that I have a little bit of blacks clipping and make sure that I don't have any whites clipping, but that I have some white. Okay, so I take the white up till I see some clipping and then just bring it back. So all that does is adds contrast, which is what that other profile was doing. Okay, let's see what Lightroom thinks is the subject. Okay, so it found the statue. Are you using any Lightroom, Al, or are you just using predominantly or completely using Neo? Let me see what your note says. Looks like you're using Neo. So if you're using all Neo, oh yes, Edward. Okay, I will come back to the questions. Let me know if you're what you're using here, and I will answer a couple of the other questions here. What was Brandon's question that I missed, Rob? Let's see. Brandon, Edward's question, yes. Unfortunately, Brandon, there isn't a way to show a side-by-side comparison in Neo. The only way to do that in Neo is the before and after. Yeah, there isn't a way to do a side-by-side because inside Lightroom, what I do is I make a virtual copy. Let me just get out of this here. In Lightroom, I make what's called a virtual copy, and that's how I did this second version of this doc here. So it didn't copy the original image. If you wanted a side-by-side version in Neo, you'd actually have to copy the original image, edit one, and don't edit the other so that you could compare them side by side. Okay, so it's kind of a workaround, but not really the greatest answer. And how I did the 3-up is I chose the thumbnails, and then I just hit N on my keyboard, Edward. Okay, so if you're looking for views, so T, again, these are keyboard shortcuts. Do you have our Lightroom keyboard shortcuts, Ed? Because you can get those as well. Make sure there's a link for the Lightroom keyboard shortcuts, please, Rob. So under here, okay, so there's comparison view, and then there's this view here. So if you're on the toolbar, it's that view. And then all I did was I clicked Shift and Tab to get rid of everything. Okay. T is the toolbar at the bottom. Okay. So all of these things are hideable. Oops. All of these things are hideable. So toolbar, or it goes away. Shift Tab is all the side panels. Tab is just the side panels. So Shift Tab is all four, so top, bottom, side. And then G is back to grid. Okay, that's all on the keyboard shortcuts. Does that answer your question? Okay, so let me get back to the statue. And did Al tell me what he's using? Just Luminar. Okay, so I'm going to pop this one over to Luminar then, because I don't want to do the mask selection here because we don't have that. So I'm going to go to Luminar Neo. Right. So everything I've done here, adjusting the highlights, shadows, and blacks, you could do in Neo as well. So we're just starting from that point. Okay. The first one I want to use here actually is going to be Enhance AI, as I want to see what it does So look at what it's doing to the statue. That does a really great thing. And let's see what it does to the sky. Okay, so there's some weird stuff going on up there in the sky for sure, right? We're getting this weird fringe and all kinds of stuff, right? So I'm not going to do that, but it does a really good job on the statue. So I'm going to go enhance and then paint it into the statue. And I almost always turn the strength down, right? Just because I like to sort of paint it in bit by bit, right? I'm not a sort of this and make a smaller brush to get his head and so on. Okay, if you paint it all at once, just doing this sort of, I call it layers, but you're able to blend the painting better, right? So what I mean by blending is it's not this hard edge. You can't just see it, right? You don't want to see your editing. Okay? So let's take a look at what that's doing. That works well. I think I want to do structure because I know that structure, right, is going to do a great thing on the statue as well. And let's try boost, which gives it that more sort of HDR look. Once again, paint it into the statue. And once again, I will be so happy when I can copy and paste a mask. I'm hoping that's their next update because I use that so often, right? Because if we did this mask once, we could just copy it from the other tool and use it again and again, right? But alas, no copy yet, right? Now I'm going to use structure, negative, like so. Actually, haha, I have an interesting thing I want to try here. Let's see if it recognizes this as a portrait. It might. Look at that. It recognizes this as a portrait because there's a face, right? So I can actually do darken the background, and I'm going to fix the depth correction. So as you go to the left, it brings the blur closer to the subject, right? And I got to fix that bit up in there. Okay, so it brings it closer to the subject. I'm going to darken the background. And that looks kind of cool. So now I'm going to zoom in here because I need to defocus the bits inside. I'm going to use a harder edge brush. So again, I'm using the harder edge brush. I'll turn this green thing off. And can you see my circles? Okay, so I'll make it bigger so you can see my circles. Soft edge brush means that when I'm painting, it's more gradual, okay? But when I have something like this that has a defined clean edge that I need to paint inside, it's going to bleed over onto that part of the statue. Okay, so when I use a harder brush, lower softness, okay, I can get closer into the edge without going over. Okay, so I'm painting with defocus here. Just have to wait for it to catch up to me. For some reason, it's not painting here. It doesn't want to paint there. There we go. Okay, so see what I did here, right? So smaller brush to get into these bits. Okay, so I'm painting with defocus because I want these parts blurred, and I missed a spot right there. And I missed a spot right there. Missed another spot. Okay, so sometimes you have to paint a few times, and you definitely want to zoom in. I would probably be better off doing a zoom in here and see how it's missed bits around the edge. So when you are doing editing like this, I'm doing a really quick and dirty job because I'm trying to demonstrate as many images as possible. But when you're doing an image like this, you have to take your time and zoom in and really go with a small brush and get these edge details, right? You know, I might want to do focus because I think it's missed a part of the head here. Let me just back out, let it catch up. Right, see what that's doing? Okay, so see how the depth correction, right? So closer to the statue, right? Now the fence is even starting to blur further away, right? So I want to go fairly close because I want those trees to be blurred, but not the fence. I think somewhere in there, the fence is just starting to get blurry. Right, now I can just dial the amount back a little bit. And I want to make sure I get this area over here. Okay, so that was kind of a cool trick. So I don't have to do the, what am I trying to say? My brain is not working today. I need more coffee, apparently. So I don't have to do the trick with replacing the sky, right? So you had tried the sky replacement, Al, and that didn't work. So I went with the portrait bokeh, and it kind of worked, right? I can add a vignette, of course. Let's make it smaller. I want to darken this bit down here on the fence. So I definitely want to get it positioned so that the fence is being darkened. Okay. Now inner light, see how that actually allows me to brighten the inner part as well. So the inner light works really great when you have a really nice defined subject like this. And I'm going to go into develop again and do that trick with dodging. Okay, so I showed you in lesson 18, this is coming up, a really great example of this because you can use this develop tool. People are complaining on some of the Luminar Neo groups and things that there's no dodge and burn tool, but I actually think this works better because look at what I can do here, right? I want to brighten his face because he doesn't have as much contrast either as the bit down here. So not only am I increasing the exposure, see that? I am increasing the contrast. Okay, I can actually increase the blacks. Okay, so remember, black is going to make him have more contrast. Or even do an S curve. Okay, so see what that's doing? Really brightening him up. So that's why I like the develop tool for dodging and burning as opposed to the old tool. I actually prefer this. So that's what I came up with, Al. Something completely different. I'd probably go in and tone these colors down a little bit. See, the green here is a little bit vibrant as well. Right. So again, everything I do is about toning things down or to bring attention to the subject. Okay. So I'm going to bring the saturation of the greens and the yellows down. See how that really works on the moss. Okay. So often there's more yellow in grass and moss than there is green. So darkening the green. I want to be careful with darkening though, because if I darken too much, it's actually adding contrast to the background. Okay, so I might even go the other way. Okay, I might lighten the green so that there's less contrast there. Okay. You see how that's just sort of taking away that bright color in the background? So one of those four things again. Remember, bright color or intense color, contrast, sharpness, and brightness. So in this image, the brightness is definitely coming from this area here and up here, but that's okay because it actually brings your attention to his face. If we want to deal with this spot here, right, I can just do another develop, take the highlights way down, right, and then I'm going to just paint in very subtly to this spot here. Okay. I just want to darken this spot. And maybe this one up here as well. So again, painting at like 30%. So now I'm still drawing. Everything is drawing their eye into the subject in the middle of the image. Okay, that's working well. Can you see what that's doing? Like so. And then, of course, I would probably add my usual mystical or maybe even dramatic on this one, Al. Try dramatic. Yes, look at that. Okay. I usually lower the local contrast, but this one actually looks really great. That one looks good. I'll leave the saturation. And again, if I don't want this to apply in the background because it's looking great on the statue, I'm just going to paint it into the statue. And once again, I wish I had copy and paste. See what that's doing? Nice. Now I'm going to go back to this one where I've darkened the sky. Another thing that I wish that we could do in Luminar Neo is rename these edits, because then I could say, develop, darken, or dodged or burned sky. And I'm actually going to add to this mask because I want to darken this railing in front here. Okay, so I'm just going to go back to that same tool and use it to paint in here. See how that's working? So you can always go back to your edits. It's non-destructible. Now, because I've used this as a plugin for Lightroom, once I go back to Lightroom, I'm not going to be able to edit again in Neo. But if you're using Neo as a standalone, okay, you absolutely can come back here at any time. So let's have a look. Okay, backlit subject, totally changed it. Now, I'm curious to see if it finds the sky for me. I'm just going to take my, I'm just going to take my portrait bokeh to 0 for a moment. So I'm not deleting it, because if you delete it or turn it off, you'll have to remask everything. So I'm just going to take it to 0 for a moment because I want to see if it will get the sky for me. Notice how the original sky was really bright. So a lot of what I've done is to darken it. Let's see. We need something with like bright clouds. So I'm just going to go into the Luminar ones. Let's try one of these. Okay, so yeah, you're right. It's not getting in there, but let's see what happens if we do mask refinement. If I do fixed details. Okay, global overwrites the original sky more so. Yeah, it's definitely not going on the inside. So nope, didn't work for me either. I actually prefer the one I did with the bokeh, so I'm going to put it back. There we go. Okay, so I hop around really quickly from tool to tool because I'm used to using the tools. And I mean, I've had Neo as long as everybody else, right? It's just a matter of how much you use it, putting in the number of hours so that you get familiar with these things, right? All right. Well, it's talking about sardines here. Oh, he's telling his Morocco story. Would I brighten his halo? Yeah, I certainly could. I mean, you see how I've darkened the rest of the sky? Is that what you mean, John? So see how I've darkened the rest so that the lightest part is inside of his halo. So yeah, in this case, we do want a halo. I talk about no halos on everything else. Yeah. Okay, lots of talk about sardine. Sheila asked, when I went from Lightroom to Luminar Neo, you got a dialog box. How did you get that? So when I went from Lightroom to Luminar Neo, I used it as a plugin. So to get there, you just right click and you choose Edit In. And then I chose Luminar Neo. And in this case, I chose edit a copy because I had already done some basic Lightroom edits. But you should get that dialog box if you do edit in Luminar Neo. Okay. But on lesson, which lesson is it where I talk about workflow and plugins, Rob? I think it was 18, right? On lesson 18 in the course, Sheila, I talk about using it as a plugin for Lightroom and Photoshop. And if you have both Lightroom and Photoshop, to do a slightly different workflow, taking it into Photoshop first. Thanks, Al. Let's take a look at our comparison here because I actually think yours was really good as well. I'm just going to, I got to download your image. Al, sorry about that. Okay, so let's just compare yours so that I can have it on the screen. And where is it? There we go. Okay, so here's Al's. Okay, so there's my version. Let me see if I can get this on the screen together somehow. No, not easily. Okay, so there's mine. I'll just do this one on full screen. Okay. I think they're both perfectly acceptable. I like what you did here, Al. And I think that adding the sun rays was really thinking outside the box. You've got some really cool colors showing up in here. I mean, was the statue metallic? Because it really, it really looks metallic here based on the colors that you've got. Right? And there's my edit. So I could have added the sun rays as well, or just a glow like around him. So you don't necessarily have to have the sun rays. Oops. Where is it? Right? You don't necessarily need the rays, but you could have the glow, right? Like he's heavenly. Buddha is the god, right? It does look like stainless steel in his edit. Yeah, it definitely looks more metallic in your edit than in mine. Yeah. All right, let's see if we can do another one. We're going over time today, but I'm in a flow, so let's just go with it. I do want to do Brandon's as well. Okay, so this is the one Brandon sent, another one that he sent, and that's the original, and that was what you came up with. So I want to take this one into Neo, okay, because I know that's what you're using. And we're going to talk about the histogram again, because what you see in the histogram there, and that's why it's so important to be able to see it inside of Neo, and why so many people want to have that back. Yeah, see, now I have apply up here. It wasn't there when I took the raw file. The reason that the histogram is so important is that it allows you to see the exposure, right? And in a representative way that's correct, because your monitor could be not calibrated correctly, right? So when you are looking at the screen, if your screen's too bright, your images are going to come out too dark when you process them. And likewise, if your screen is too dark, it'll be the opposite. So what I'm looking at here is there's no white, and there's lots of black, and then there's lots of tones in the middle. That's what your histogram tells you. Okay, so the middle tones is the eagle. So I'm actually going to drag the slider on the curve over to the right. Okay, so that's boosting this white part. Okay, just so until it sort of reaches the edge here. And then I'm going to brighten the middle. Okay, quite a lot. So look at the detail that's in that eagle, right? If I brighten him, look at that. He ends up coming out on a pure white sky, right? So I'm going to just lift him up a little bit. And I want to fix his color because the sky looks kind of pink, right? So I'm going to use the eyedropper and just see if I can neutralize it. So now the sky is neutral, but I want it a little bit cooler. And we can try a sky replacement for sure. Right? But I think I want one that's very, very gentle if I'm going to do a sky replacement. Right? I want to increase the exposure. So remember, exposure is midtones. So look what that does to the bird. He's got lots of detail there, okay? But I want to do it on him and not on the sky. So you know what? I'm going to just push it a little bit, and then I'm going to come back and do a second one on him. Okay, so let's see our curve. Okay, so our curve looks a little better. I might back this off a little bit now. Okay, and I'm just going to check for, oops, not transform, optics. Okay. Because there isn't, I didn't open the raw file, you would also see the chromatic aberration. Oops, what did I do with the color there? Yeah, now he's sort of off color. So did I do something with the color? What the heck did I do? Let's just try daylight. Okay. Did I click something? Okay, so I'm going to zoom in here because I want to see if he's got any fringe. Yeah, he's black and white somehow now. What did I make him black and white? Oh, saturation. That's what I hit. And there we go. Okay, so I'm looking for a color fringe around him, and I don't see any, but I'm just going to do auto defringe in case, because if I darken the sky, we may start to see a fringe around him of color. Okay. All right, let's try that again. Okay, something like that. So we just corrected the color a little bit, boosted the contrast, and now I'm going to come into the next one, which is enhance. Okay, so often I will do those two first. Okay, and let's come in a little closer on the bird because I really want to see what kind of detail I can pull out of him. Okay, so look at all of his feathers. There's lots of detail there. We can see the thing that's kind of stuck to his foot. Poor guy, I want to go pull it off for him. Okay, so look what this is doing in terms of picking up his feathers. It's doing a really good job. Okay, Sky Enhancer isn't really going to do anything because there's nothing there. It's just super overcast. So I'm going to stick with the enhance. Okay, structure, let's take it all the way. Now look what that does to his feathers, right? That's amazing. So I'm going to bring that up. And if we go boost, actually, look at that. That does a nice job on his feathers there. So I kind of play with the two sliders. Okay. Look at that picking up his feathers. Nice sharp image, Brandon. Really great job. Okay. So far we're there. Now, I wouldn't crop this image at all, to be honest, because you've got lots of space for him to fly into, which is ideal, right? If anything, the only thing that I would do crop-wise, let's see what Luminar suggests. Yeah, I was going to say about like that. If anything, I would do just some off the bottom, like that. Okay. And I see sort of another blob here, so we can do remove dust spots. Definitely check your lenses and your sensor to see when you're getting spots like this, right? Of course, you have Neo to automatically remove them, but you want to make sure that you have a nice clean lens and a nice clean sensor. Yeah, took care of that. Okay, so use the dust spot removal. Okay. Now I want to make sure that I've got good black in the image. So I'm going to go back to develop, okay, and make sure I have black. And give them a bit more contrast. So I'm just going to do a slight S curve. See what that does? And notice how it's saturated the colors a bit more. So I'm just going to dial it down a little bit. So I don't want them to be orange. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so now we could try a sky replacement. And in this one, I think we would want to do something very, very simple, okay? I don't want bright blue sky, bright blue, clouds and puffy clouds behind him because it's going to overpower him, okay? And it doesn't look realistic because the sky, it would look different from that angle, okay? So these are overpowering him. That's better, but I think one that I had in mind is this California Clear Skies. And this was a free download that you can do on the Skylum website. So I'm just going to try one of these that are softer. Okay. See how that looks a little bit more natural? So he's literally on the blue sky. That one's too dark. So I'm going to go with this one. Oops. And I'm going to make sure that it's masked well. So I'm going to zoom in. Look at the great job it did on masking, even around his feathers, right? It sees that they're transparent. I don't even think I need to do anything here. It did a really good job masking. Okay. So that's where you want to look for any mistakes in masking. Looks great. Okay, I don't need scenery lighting necessarily because I don't want him to look blue. Okay, maybe a tiny bit. Don't need a reflection. And I think we're okay here. So I could shift the color if I want it warmer or cooler. Okay, so let's give him a little bit of sunset. Okay, and then I'm going to do one final develop again. Doesn't like my keyboard shortcuts today. One final develop today, similarly to what I did on the Magpie, and I'm looking to affect his head again because the eagle should have a nice white head, right? So again, I want to paint it in, make my brush slightly harder because I don't need to paint it onto the sky. I don't want to paint it onto the sky. So I just want to get his face. Okay, so I'm going to paint it, overpaint it, and I'll show you what happens if I use a soft brush. Okay, I'm going to erase all of that for a moment. Okay, so I'll show you what not to do when you're painting. Okay, so what not to do is paint at 100% strength with a soft brush like this. Okay, so when I have a soft brush, meaning the circles are far away from each other like this, if I paint his head, okay, oops, I'm erasing still. Okay, if I'm going to paint his head, look what happens. See how the glow is going around him onto the sky? See, that's what's called a halo. Okay, that's what you don't want to do. Okay, so you want to use a harder edge brush in this case, and a smaller brush and a lower strength. Okay, so you can't just do it all in one. You gotta do it a little bit at a time. Okay, so I'm just painting into his face. And when I get to the point where it's too narrow, I make a smaller brush using the bracket keys. So square bracket key left makes it smaller and right makes it bigger. You see how now I can actually see where I've painted? That's another reason why to paint in little by little. Okay, so if you paint at a strong amount, you will start to see your painting. Okay. I'm getting close to being at 100%. I want to make sure I've got his eye. So some of these things, you really have to pay attention to detail. See how many times I'm going over it until I get it. And you might even go into 100% as well. And finally, I'm going to do his tail also. Okay. And I'm just doing it at 30% because see what happened there? Now you can kind of see the editing. So in this case, I'm going to do a softer brush and just do a little bit around the edges. Okay, so let's see what that's doing. So I did a little bit of a halo there that I need to erase. Take care of that. So watch out for those halos. And do you understand what I mean by halos? I'm going to ask everybody that. Okay. Ed said, what's the advantage of adjusting the curve versus the exposure slider at the outset? Neither. They both do the same thing, Ed. The curve allows me to see on the histogram, if you're using Mac, where the endpoints for the white and the black are. And I literally just brought them in to meet the histogram so that the data meets the dots. And I was already there, so I just used the curve to add contrast. Right? So exposure slider, all exposure does is adjusts the brightness of the midtones of your image. Curves can adjust the tones of the blacks, the whites, the midtones, the contrast, and so on. Okay, so you have more options in curves, but you can do similar things with the sliders, right? So what I did with curves, I would have to do the black slider, the white slider, the exposure slider, the highlight slider, and the shadow slider. So you need 5 sliders to do what I did in curves. Okay? Okay, you're understanding the glow. Awesome. Okay, so let's take this one. Interesting. Now I've lost my apply tool. What's happening? That's bizarre. Look at that. My apply is now gone. Right? It was there when I opened the image. I wonder if there's one particular one that's causing that. As soon as I did sky replacement, it seemed to go. Let's see what happens if I remove it. But that's kind of what I would do with that image, Brandon. Yes, magnificent bird, and you did paint the photo not as easy. Yeah, so it's just practice, Brandon, and really you have to take your time and zoom in. But I'm going to delete this sky replacement because I'm wondering if that's what's causing me to not be able to export. Yeah, bizarre. Look at that. It doesn't allow me to export now. All right, well, I'll definitely be doing a video for Skylum today. Yeah, if I go all the way back to the beginning, yeah, my apply button is gone. But it worked earlier, right? So strange. This is also the reason why I would actually prefer to have an undo button, right? Because I just removed the sky, and now to get it back, I'd have to go back and do all of that again, right? So I'd have to go apply the sky one more time, right? There we go. So that was my final edit. No, it's not just you, Sheila. I would say send them a bug report because something weird is going on there. And you guys all were my witnesses that it was there when I opened the image, and then at some point, the apply button just disappeared. So I'm going to send them a bug report, and we'll let them know that there's a problem. Again, they're pretty good at fixing those things right away. So I think I'm going to stop here this week. I've got another fantastic image from Marty, but I'm going to save that one for next week. He sent in his edit, which is really good. Looks like he did a sky replacement, cropped a little bit. So I'm going to work on the same image and see what I come up with. He's probably using Neo because he's done a sky replacement. And this one of yours, Ken, I'm going to save till next week as well. So I may do something completely different than your version. So this is actually Ken's edited version, and the original raw file looks like that. So tune in next week, same time, same place. I'll remind you to submit your images, and I'll leave this on the screen. So for those of you who are not currently doing our Luminar Neo course, you should check it out. Rob's going to share a link in the chat. And for those of you that are doing it, tell the others why they need to join us in the course and what you're enjoying about it. So thanks again. Thanks, Edward, for joining. As always, a great question. And we'll see you all same time next week. Take care.